If you're enjoying Cowboy Crossroads and would like to help me keep the podcast going, you can become a patron at patreon.com/cowboycrossroads. Patreon is an online platform that allows you to offer monthly support to creative endeavors that you enjoy and value. In exchange for that support, you get access to exclusive content. You can check that out online at patreon.com/cowboycrossroads. That's patreon.com/cowboycrossroads. I'd like to start today's show with a poem written by S. Omer Barker entitled Code of the Cow Country. This poem is often attributed as anonymous, but it was first published in Barker's 1954 book, Songs of the Saddlemen. It don't take such a lot of laws to keep the rangeland straight, nor books to write 'em in because there's only 6 or 8. The first one is the welcome sign, wrote deep in western hearts. My camp is yours, and yours is mine, and all cow country parts. Treat with respect all womankind, same as you would your sister. Take care of neighbors' strays you find, and don't call cowboys mister. Shut pasture gates when passing through, and taken all in all, be just as rough as pleases you, but never mean nor small. Talk straight, shoot straight, and never break your word to man nor boss. Plumb always kill a rattlesnake, and don't ride a sore-backed hoss. It don't take law nor pedigree to live the best you can. These few is all it takes to be a cowboy and a man. Howdy folks, this is Andy Hedges, and you're listening to Cowboy Crossroads. On each episode, I interview a different guest and ask them to share stories and discuss music, poetry, and culture from the working cowboy west and beyond. My guest today is Dale Burson. Dale Burson is a singer, songwriter, and a fourth-generation rancher in the Texas Panhandle. Dale is also a multi-instrumentalist, and he plays guitar, banjo, fiddle, and mandolin. He's received the Wrangler Award for Outstanding Original Western Composition from the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City, and he has performed at the National Cowboy Poetry Gathering in Elko, Nevada. In addition to playing solo, Dale has performed with his son Ross and his daughter Brittany as the Burson family, and he's also a longtime member of Red Steagall's touring band. I sat down with Dale on his family ranch in Channing, Texas, and recorded this interview. Here's Dale Burson.
Well, my great-granddad came from Palo Pinto. He was the oldest of 13, I think. When he turned 13 years old, his dad said, I can't afford to keep you around here any longer. And so he gave him a horse and a spring wagon and a cow and a bull and said, if you can't make it with that, you can't make it. See ya. So he left Palo Pinto and kind of drifted north. He didn't like the heat down there too much. And day worked and traded and whatever, and ended up at Memphis, Texas, and worked around there for a while and ended up at Silverton, homesteaded there. He was very, very, very frugal guy. The other people that homesteaded wouldn't have grocery money, and so he'd loan them money to go get groceries or whatever. And then when they defaulted, he ended up with their country. And he ended up with 100 sections down there over time. And then he put in the first bank at Silverton. And J. Evetts Haley writes about him in his book, and he called him Tight John Burson. And So anyway, they started off at Silverton, and that's where my granddad was born and raised. He was the oldest of those kids. He moved over by Borger at Spring Creek and leased a place over there for a good number of years. And that's where Dad was born, and his two brothers. And then in 43, I think it was, Granddad found the north end of this place. And this sets right down Rita Blanca Canyon, south of Dalhart. And this was part of the XIT where they ran the mares for the rest of the ranch. And he got that 9 sections up there then, and then we got this end in 57. We've had a lot of country, a lot of other places, Colorado, New Mexico, and all that, but this has always been home, you know. A lot of history here. There's still some XIT fences standing here. They need to be taken out, but, you know, some old ribbon wire fences and double barbed fences. And I've got 2 windmills that are still XIT. They were drilled in XIT days, stovepipe casing. And about 20 years ago, Becky and I were working on one of them, and the motor on it was just worn completely out. We'd had it rebuilt several times, and it got to where you couldn't rebuild it. But it was the case, the air motor case, was stamped XIT 1888. And I've still got it. I hadn't thrown it away. So, I mean, there's a lot of history there, and it's good country, best country I know of in this part of the world. It's got artesian wells and sub-irrigated meadows and pretty drought-proof, you know. When everybody else is having to sell out, we may sell down some, but we had never had to completely clear out. And, you know, it's reasonably close to town, 15 miles or so to town, but, you know, you're 30 miles from a grocery store, an hour away from Amarillo, you know, so you can get there, but you need to have a reason, you know. You don't just show up there. But, you know, our family's been in the ranching business for a long time, and that's all I've known, you know, really. It's a great way to raise a family. It's a lot of satisfaction when you get up in the morning and you look outside and what's out there is yours, you know, and it's not really ours. Let me put it this way. We're managing it. You know, we know we don't actually own anything. God lets us do it. But to look out there and it's you can't see the neighbor's place, that's pretty sweet, you know. I was raised in this house, and folks moved to Amarillo, and Becky and I came in here and raised our kids here, and now our grandkids come here, and, you know, they can just run as hard as they want to run, as far as they want to run, and have more fun than anybody. Cattle business is one of those deals. You're bound by what the prices are. You can't do anything about the prices, and you can't do anything about the rain. You just have to adapt. Good years like this, you really take note of them, because it means a lot. Because you've seen those years when it didn't rain, and when the prices were just in the tank, you know, and how are we going to make it work? But years like this, you're really fortunate to get them. Anyway, that's kind of the history of what, in a nutshell, kind of what we've done here.
If you spend much time around Dale Burson or listen to his songs, it's easy to see that his grandfather was a big influence on him. He wrote these lines in a song about his grandfather that's entitled Pap. In his life, he'd seen it all. I know he'd had a ball. He always had fun with what he did. At least it seemed that way to me. And how I longed to be just like him when I was a kid.
Their house is about 2.5 miles north of here. Yeah, Pap, we called him Pap, and Pap and Granny was always there, you know. And he was an old style cowman. I mean, he was a cowman from way back, and his ideas were really good ideas and very conservative ideas. And his thought, when I was a kid, I asked him one time, you know, how do you be successful in the cattle business? And He said, if you own some country and you own the cows that are on it, a cow will make you a living every year. Now, you may not be able to spend much on anything, but they will make you a living. And he said, but yearlings, on the other hand, he said, I never knew a fella that broke even. You either made it big or you lost it big. He said, I'll stay with cows. And when I was a kid, Dad and my three brothers and I fed a lot of cattle, had a lot of yearlings, bunches of yearlings. And looking back, Pap was right. You either made it big or you lost it. So we pretty much stayed with cows since Becky and I have been here. And he's right. It's tough. Of course, in his day, you know, he used to say 100 cows make you a good living. Now then, 100 cows won't even start to make you a living. But, you know, 500 cows is kind of what we got here. And you can kind of get along on 500 cows. You're not going to be buying jet airplanes, but you can pay your grocery bill, kind of do what you need to do. But there's more to life than money, but it's pretty hard to operate without money. You try to balance that out, but yeah, he was an interesting guy. He knew Charlie Goodnight when he was a kid. They neighbored Goodnight's deal, the JAs. So he was around for back in the day.
Did you have stories about those days that he passed down, or Goodnight? Yeah,
he did. He was not a huge fan. He said he was a hard man. Of course, he was kind of the bull of the woods in that area, and they had a big drift that snow came through and they drifted everything together, and they had a big gather and sorting them out, all that. And he said he remembered that when he was a kid. He and his dad went over there for the big sort, and all he really ever said too much about it was he was a hard man. And Granddad was great friends with Marshall Cater. They traded bulls and were big buds, and he was in the group that used to meet at the Amarillo Hotel and trade cows. And so he knew all the old bunch, and a lot of them were out here. They'd come by and maybe stay a day or two. Don't do that anymore. You don't go to somebody's house anymore and just stop and stay and visit. And people are in too big a hurry. And we've lost the art of conversation, I think, and interpersonal relationship. Now we get on the phone and we text them or we call them or whatever, or read about them on Facebook. And I'm as bad as anybody. I do that too, but I do miss people showing up and sitting around playing dominoes or playing music and letting the kids go run and play till they fall down asleep in a pile. And we still do that occasionally here. We'll have a do. We've had 130 here before, and just open her up and the kids go and run and play, and the grown-ups sit around and visit and play music and eat. And to me, that's part of this lifestyle that I don't want it to go away to where nobody does it anymore, because it really is a fun thing to do. But it seems like it's getting less and less. I can remember doing dances back in the day when I was a kid, first started playing, and we'd get together and you just go to somebody's house, and there might be 5 couples or 10 couples show up there, and they'd roll up the rugs and you just play, and the ones that wasn't playing was dancing, and the kids was running and playing, and they just had food out all the time. And if you got hungry, go in there and get something to eat. When you got tired, you laid down and went to sleep, and got up the next day and went home. And those kind of things built a lot of relationships over the years. Some of the people that back in the day that would do that kind of stuff and that meant a lot to me, taught me a lot, was, Eloy Gonzalez from Clayton, played dances around forever. And that's the first gig I ever got, was when I was 15. He had me come play a deal with him, and I didn't know what I was doing, but he let me sit in with him. That kind of gave you the bug. But we'd do a lot of those old ranch dances back then, Of course, then Buck and Rooster Morris, and Rooster was on a place over on Reynolds over here at Bull Camp, and go over there at late of an evening and sit in his kitchen, and he'd play fiddle and I'd play guitar or banjo or whatever I had with me, and his wife would play drums in her nightgown in the kitchen, and we'd do that till about daylight, and I'd get home time to go to work. I wouldn't do it now, probably, but... Well, Granny was my dad's mother was a classically trained pianist. And matter of fact, that's her piano right there. So we grew up around her playing classical music a lot. And she thought it was very important that you learn, at least try to play something. And so she was going to teach us all how to play piano. And if she could play it, I could play it. I never learned to read music, still don't know how to read music. But she thought I was reading music. She was teaching me how to read music, and I wasn't getting it. And so I'd say, well, I don't understand how this part goes. And so she'd play it, and I'd play it for her. And when she figured out that I really wasn't learning to read music, that was a bad day. And then my older brothers convinced me that playing piano was a sissy thing to do. And so I quit playing piano. I wish now I'd have kept playing piano, but I can't do anything really on a piano anymore. But anyway, that kind of got the thing going. And then fast forward a little while, and hee-haw was big on TV, and it intrigued me. The banjo intrigued me, and so I asked folks for a banjo for Christmas and didn't get one. And so I asked for a banjo the next Christmas, and they got me this little, I'm sure they thought I wouldn't take to it, got this little Best Buy banjo, and the next summer they sent me up north of Clayton on a place we had up there, no radio, no TV, no telephone, and the closest neighbor was about 12 miles, and so perfect place to learn to play the banjo. And so I just hammered on that thing until I wore it out, and ended up getting me a better one. I worked all one summer to buy a Gibson banjo, still got it. So that was kind of what I started off doing, and had a kid in Channing that was a great guitar player, and just a year older than me, and we started doing contests, banjo contests. That really got me going, because we had a lot of success at that. And the 4-H bunch had a deal every year at the XIT or at the fair up there, I guess. And it was a talent contest. And if you won that, you got to open one night at the Tri-State Fair in Amarillo for the big act that was coming in. And we won that deal every year in high school. So I got to meet some people that I would have never, ever met. We opened for the $1 Million Band twice, Chet Atkins and Roy Clark and Floyd Kramer and all that bunch. Great guys. Couldn't have been any nicer to us. We opened for Merle Haggard. We opened for Mel Tillis, and we opened for the Statlers. And every one of them couldn't have been any nicer. And so that gave me more of a feel that, that's a neat community to, if you can get into that deal. Not only do you get feedback from the audience, which makes you feel good. It's kind of an adrenaline rush, but the people that at that time, I felt like everybody in the music business was just the nicest people ever. Well, not all of them are, but a lot of them really are. And so that kind of pushed me a little more to doing that. And I didn't learn to play guitar, didn't even pick up a guitar for a long time, because there was a lot of guitar players around. But banjo music here was not big. And once you kind of got away from the contest stuff, nobody really wanted to hear a banjo. And so I picked up guitar and started kind of trying to learn it, and then picked up fiddle and tried to learn it, and the mandolin and steel and one thing or another, and got fairly proficient at some of it not so much. But I wouldn't sing. I did not like the sound of my voice. I didn't sing in the shower. I didn't sing horseback. I didn't sing in the pickup. I just didn't like the way I sounded, and so I didn't sing at all. But I'd play while somebody else sang. Loved doing that. And didn't want to be the guy in the front. I wanted to be the guy back there trying to help them sound as good as I could make them sound. And that gave me a lot of satisfaction. And I was about 32, something like that. And all of a sudden, it's a long story, but was convinced to try singing. And and the way they got me was this preacher actually did it. He said, "Why don't you sing?" I said, "I don't sing. I don't like my voice and all that." And he opened up his Bible and he showed me the verse that says, "Make a joyful noise unto the Lord." He said, "If you'll notice, it doesn't say only if you sing well." Well, I couldn't really argue the fact. And so I started singing a little bit, and yeah, here we go, still doing singing and stuff.
Dale Burson comes from the cowboy music tradition of the Texas Panhandle that includes voices like Charlie Willis, Jess Morris, Rooster Morris, Frankie McWhorter, Larry McWhorter, and Buck Ramsey. Buck Ramsey once wrote these words: "I think our tribe, our nation, and our species has a common memory that keeps us through tradition connected, reminded of the precious things our minds and hearts and souls have sifted and sanctified from our long and common experience."
There was some old guys that on Reynolds up here, some old time guys that knew poetry. Most of their poetry wouldn't be considered necessarily cowboy poetry, but it was classic poems. And occasionally they'd, around the bunkhouse or whatever, they'd come out with one, and everybody just stopped and listened, and they were, I don't know how accurate they were as far as reciting them, but they kept that going, and it didn't happen real often. So, it was really something special when they did. And then, like I say, you had Buck and you had Rooster and you had, some guys around that were playing old songs. So, Rooster played a lot of old fiddle tunes and old cowboy song type things, And his folks were big into, his mother, Vera, was an encyclopedia of old cowboy songs and old fiddle songs, knew them all. And she, if she was wherever you were, she'd ask you to do a song that you'd never heard anybody else do. And Rooster would play it, and I'd learn it, and so then you could do it together after that, And so when Vera'd ask you to do that song, well, here you go. But anyway, there was guys around, that did that stuff, and Eloy Gonzalez could play you every old cowboy song. He was a swing guy, but if you pressed him just a little on cowboy songs, he knew them all. And he was a band leader at 12. When he was 12, he would catch a horse and throw a guitar on the back, go to the neighbors' ranches, and he would hire musicians to go with him and play dances at 12, horseback. And so he knew all that old. It's funny how life happens. You at the time I didn't think it was that special. I thought that was just normal. And then fast forward however many years this has been, and you look back now and you realize just how special it was to get to be around those old guys and learn what they were trying to show you. I wished I'd have paid more attention. Every region I'm sure has their own. Every place has their own story and their own characters and whatnot, but this one seems to be rich in that. That there was a lot of diverse people, people that maybe weren't born here, but moved here way back. And so they bring their take, the Irish guys or the whatever they came from. They bring what they had here, and it kind of melds into everything else that's here, and it just makes it a lot fuller, a lot more diverse, and some of the stories they'd tell. I used to love to listen to the old guys that talk about back in the day, and especially the guys that weren't always the hero of the story. My granddad was one of those. He wasn't ever the hero of the story, but he could tell you some history and things, about drives and things that they did and it was just common to him, but to me it was foreign because when I was hatched, we didn't do cattle drives like that. And you had pickups and trailers. You didn't catch two horses and lead one and switch horses a couple of times during the day and cover however many miles. So that was interesting to me. We inherited an old man. We bought a place in Colorado, and he was there. And so we just kind of inherited him, and his name was Tom Belcher. And Tom started working for the XIT here when he was a kid. And he was another guy that he wasn't a hero of the story. But as far as we knew, he never married. And we kind of had to retire him in Colorado at that place. And we moved him to Channing, and we rented a duplex, one side of a duplex for him. And he was, gosh, he was ancient, I thought, then. But listening to old Tom talk, and I said, so you worked here when you were a kid, and he could tell you every old XIT well and where the fences were on this whole part of the XIT. He said, yeah, he said, I started off on the fencing crew, and he said, I got on the windmilling crew. And he said, we'd go out for a month and a half at a time in a wagon and go change oil and work on windmills and whatever with the team. And he said, I came back to Channing one time, and the boss told me, he said, Tom, you need to take off some time. You need to. And he said, well, I don't need to take off. What would I do? He said, I don't care, but you're going to take off a few days. And so they said they paid me. And he said, I'm sitting on the deal up there in Channing on the sidewalk, wondering what I'm going to do with all this time. And he said, I decided I'd heard about this town called Amarillo. I thought, I'm just going to ride over and see what that's like. And so he said, I caught my horse, and he said, I got to Tascosa. And he said, I knew better than to go down into Tascosa. He said, that's not a good place to be. So he said, I camped out on the hill up there on the north side of the river where I could see Tascosa. And he said, it was wild and woolly down there. So you could hear people hollering and everything. He said, I didn't need in that. Next morning he got up and he crossed the river and he rode towards Amarillo. He said, let me tell you, he said, I saw a sight that I'd never thought I'd ever see. He said, I rode up on the hill and I'm looking down at Amarillo, biggest town I'd ever heard of. He said, there was 18 lights in that town, the biggest town I ever seen. And so we got to pressing him on the thing, and I'm trying to figure out which hill he was sitting on looking down into Amarillo. And finally figured it out. Where Western Street crosses I-40 is kind of a little hill there. That's where he was sitting, looking down toward downtown of Amarillo now. And he said he just sat there and just stared at it that night. And he got up the next morning and went down in town. And he said, I found the finest thing there ever was. He said, they had canned oysters there. And he said, I got me a can of oysters. He says, the best thing I ever put in my head. He said, I spent every dime I had eating oysters. And when I run out of money, he said, I just caught my horse, rode back up here, and went back to work. But that kind of stories have always interested me, and from a guy that was actually there, and it wasn't some wild woolly stampede story or whatever. It was just but he could take you right to an old casing in the ground that you didn't know was there. And he said, yeah, there used to be a windmill right here. We worked on this one and went here and there and yonder. And those kind of guys they fuel your imagination. It's like writing songs or poems or whatever. They paint this picture, but it causes your mind to go there, and you paint your own picture of it. And he could tell stories that would just cause you to go away and kind of live it yourself, more or less, Which that kind of thing helps, I think, with writing, because you're a little more able to get away from yourself for just a minute and paint a picture, and hopefully somebody else can paint theirs. And this culture was really neat, and neighbors meant something. We were blessed with great neighbors. Reynoldses and Fort Proctor were great neighbors, and the Houghtons and the Holts, and just good people, and would do anything for you.
Where was Floyd Proctor at up here?
He's just south and west of here. As a matter of fact, our southwest corner is his. That place is northeast corner. He was a good man, and his foreman up here was Junior Hayes, and Junior and Dad were friends. And when Floyd come up, not every time, but fairly often, he'd have Junior drive him over here to see Granddad or see Dad or whatever. And I'll never forget, I was about 12 or 13, long in there, and we were branding out here in these pens here at the house, and they pulled up. Mr. Proctor and Junior pulled up and was watching and visiting, and we took a break, I guess to eat dinner or something, and I was about the age I really wanted to know these deep questions and whatever, and I asked, Mr. Proctor, I said, I'd like to get your take on something. I said, how do you get to be a success in the cattle business? And he said, well, don't ever own one more cow than you have an oil well to support. And I said, yeah, right. And he said, you can rest assured, son, I will never own one more cow than I have an oil well to support. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but it was an awesome line, and it probably was true, knowing him. But he was always very generous with his time for kids, especially, and he was a gentleman. A lot of those old guys, a lot of them were true gentlemen, and that seems to me it's getting a little rarer, maybe. But maybe it's just I'm getting old and crotchety. But I told Chris Isaacs the other day, we were visiting and talking about somebody that has gone on, and I said, it's sad, but I've come to the realization that our heroes are all dying off. And and me included, I don't see people replacing them. I don't see that kind of people. And he said, well, but you don't know how the younger generation views your generation. Hopefully they view it in the same way. But I said, I just don't see that kind of people, like my granddad and Mr. Proctor. And hopefully somebody will think what we're doing is worthwhile to emulate or at least talk about. But I think a lot of it is we just don't take the time to get to know them. Don't really listen to what they're trying to tell you. They could teach you lessons without teaching you. A lot of it by example, but they could drop a little line on you, and maybe 20 years later it'd come back to you, and then you realize what they were trying to tell you. They didn't browbeat you with it. They just, there it is. But anyway, it's been a real blessed life in that. Not that it's always been easy, it sure hadn't, but I wouldn't trade it. I really have never been able to imagine myself at a 8 to 5 job. I appreciate people that can and that deal with the public all day, every day. I just can't see myself. I guess I could have if I needed to, but thankfully, the way I'm geared, this works really well for me because I've got a lot of time that it's just me or Becky and I, or when the kids were little, we're kind of our own little tribe, and we did everything here that needed doing. And you reflect back on that, and you get pretty thankful that you were able to do that. But I still enjoy going out and meeting folks and like these shows and things. That's awesome to me. It's a lot of fun.
Dale Burson has recorded 2 albums with his son Ross and his daughter Brittany under the name The Burson Family. In the liner notes to one of those albums, Red Stegall wrote these words: "The Burson family is one of the strongest families I have ever encountered and is the perfect example of a family that works and prays together to form a bond that nothing on earth can break." Red went on to refer to the Bursons as pure, unadulterated American.
Ross wanted to learn. I was playing music some with other folks, and there's always music going on around here of an evening. And anyway, Ross wanted to learn to play fiddle, and so we got him a little bitty fiddle, and he started taking some lessons and was doing good with it. And Brittany, who's, I don't know, 18 months younger than he is, he was 4. And so Brittany wanted to be a part and wanted to do it too. And so the fiddle teacher got her a little cigar box and a ruler. Oh, that wasn't good enough. And so she just hated that. And so we found her a 16th size fiddle. She's always been she has an ear like nobody I've ever seen. And even at that age, she could tell you she didn't like that fiddle because it squawked. Didn't sound right. And so we went through a lot of fiddles trying to find her something that she liked. And so she took off. She was playing at 2. I showed them what little I knew. And Ross figured out early on that his sister was going to be a lot better fiddle player than he was. And so he got started on the mandolin, and is good at it and liked doing it. And so that's kind of what we stuck with, kept doing that. And the farther along they got, we'd take them to the fiddle contests, and Brittany would excel at that. And she had a beautiful voice. And so by the time we met you, I think, if I remember right, along in there, Brittany was kind of our lead singer because I wouldn't sing. She played fiddle, played the lead on fiddle, and Ross played mandolin, and I played guitar. And they were a hoot to take. I mean, you know how taking your kids with you is, and it can be a challenge, but they were very grown up for their age as far as performers go. And I told them early on, and I said, right now you're the cute little Burson kids. But at some point, you're not going to be the cute little kids anymore. You're going to have to be able to perform like grown-ups perform, or people are not going to want to hear you. And they took that to heart, apparently, because they really took off and really worked at it harder. I don't remember which year it was at Elko, but we were on the Saturday night show, and people were just very supportive of the kids. They always were. And they've been bragging on them before the show. Oh my gosh, you can't wait to hear you, and blah, blah, blah. And I caught them in the green room, and we were just kind of having our little huddle over there, getting ready to go out. And I said, I want y'all to remember something. I said, we don't do this for a living. This is not how we make our living. We do this because we enjoy doing it and all that. And I said, you need to remember, the reason those people are out there in those seats are not because you're on stage. The reason you're on stage is because there's people out there in the seats. The minute you start thinking you're better than somebody else at this, we're through. We're not going to go. We're not going to do that. You're not going to measure yourself against and think you're better than they are. We're doing this because it's fun and we enjoy doing it. And if we can bring something to the table, that's great. And from that day on, I never knew them to get prima donna-esque about anything. They just thoroughly enjoyed getting the opportunity to do it, and which made it a lot more fun for me and Becky and hopefully the audiences.
Dale Burson writes songs with descriptive language that takes you straight to the Texas panhandle ranch country that he calls home. When I visited Dale's place for the first time, I told him that I felt like I had been there before from listening to his songs. Listen to these lines from Dale's song, A Life More Than This. The wind's getting nippy, the leaves have turned gold. I break out my Carhartt to ward off the cold. The fall work is going by faster each year. I could be someplace warmer, but I'd rather be here.
I'd written some songs back when that really didn't mean anything to anybody. It was just learning mainly. Then when Red Steagall called and wanted me to start playing guitar and singing harmony with him, and we spent a lot of time on the road, and a lot of time just me and him. And I picked his brain about songwriting because I don't know of anybody that I would rather emulate than Red. And one thing he told me, this was way back there. I think I don't remember how many years I've worked for him, 20 some odd years now. But early on he told me, he said, all I can tell you is write about what you know. Don't try to write about something that you know nothing about. It will come off as disingenuous and won't mean much to anybody. So that stuck with me. And so what I know is this place and this life and this lifestyle, and I've also wanted to promote it, that it's a family friendly lifestyle. It's you're proud of what you do. You don't have to put somebody else down to make yourself feel good about what you do. And the sounds here, the sounds of a windmill that's working, the sounds and I did a deal one time that Hal Cannon, and he brought the lady from Australia, and they wanted to do the sounds of the cowboy thing, and I'd written that song. They wanted to record that, and she asked me what the most moving sound that I'd ever, as a cowboy, I'd ever heard. And I said, absolute total silence. And she said, that's not a sound. And I said, oh yeah, it is. I said, unless you've ever experienced it, you probably don't understand. And I took her out, just me and her, out here, and set her up out there. And it was one of those nights there wasn't a wind, coyotes weren't howling, nothing. And she understood after that. And I said, if you want to know who you are and what you're about, expose yourself to absolute silence. And you'll learn a lot in a hurry. So anyways, I've always just tried to write about what I know and how things affect me, how they move me, or people that I've known. Like we were talking to older guys, and the song Dan Shipley and I did about when the grass was still deep. That was written basically off of one line that a guy up at Reynolds at the bunkhouse said, and we stole it, and here we go, and built the picture around that.
What was that line?
When I came to this country, there weren't but 6 stars, and the moon was the size of an egg. Now, and these old guys would come out with things like that just, where did it come from? I don't know. But is it a good line? Absolutely. And it thrilled me when Red did a whole album entitled Dreaming When the Grass Was Still Deep and recorded that song. But I never really thought about writing a song to necessarily appeal to the masses, to try to sell records. It's more, to me, it's describing what I've experienced. And if it means something to somebody, that's all the pay I'll ever expect. And it does all the good to me if I'm at a show and I do a song and I look out there in the audience and you can see the ones that get it, that it means something, or they're going on their own journey from what you're saying, or they're crying or whatever. It used to bother me when somebody'd be crying when I was singing, because I thought I'd done something wrong. No, it's not that necessarily. It's affecting them. Red and I had another conversation one time, and we decided that art of any kind, whether it's a painting or a poem or a song or a sculpture or whatever, if it doesn't evoke emotion, it's not art. It's just words that rhyme or whatever. if it doesn't move you to some emotion, whether it's laughter or whatever, or cause you to go somewhere in your mind, then it's not art. So I've always tried to, and I don't hit it every time by any means, but I always try to paint a picture of some kind that somebody could take hold of and either finish it their own way or appreciate the way I painted it and cause it to mean something to somebody. 100 years from now, if somebody listens to it, I hope it does the same thing for them. Then that figures that's a good song. And I've written enough stinkers to know that not every one of them can do that. I get chasing rabbits and they don't mean anything. Most of the time I don't sit down and try to write a song. I'll have an idea or a line that I heard, or be out here doing something and I'll see a scene that causes that, or a sound or whatever. And it may fit in with something I've already got going, but years ago we were at some deal, and you know how people play off each other, performers play off each other a lot, which helps to some degree. And one guy was making fun of wannabe cowboys. And it built off of that, and they just kept getting a little farther out, and basically bashing people that were never cowboy but wanted to or whatever, and dressed the part or whatever. And it bothered me. And I thought, it's a little disingenuous, because 90% of the people that are out there in that audience that are buying your CDs have never cowboyed a day in their life. But in their heart, they always thought they could have if life had gone that way. And so I wrote a song called "The Hand," and it addressed that. And I don't know how many people have come up to me and said, "That's me. That's me." And had I not become a car salesman or whatever, I believe I could have been a good cowboy. And they immerse themselves in the literature of it and the songs and everything else. And in their mind, had life gone different, they could have done it. And I believe they could have too. But I want them to feel a part. I want them to feel like then they are a part. Just because you don't do it for a living doesn't mean you can't be in that group and be like-minded, and overused phrase is the cowboy code, but there's a lot to that too. Say what you mean what you say, stand by what you tell somebody you're going to do it. You don't have to be a cowboy to follow those guidelines. That's what we promote. Treat people with respect and honor your word. The world would be a better place if more people did that, I think. Maybe that's being a little forward on my part, but I think there's too many people that don't mean what they say and don't honor their word. And it's a shame.
Cowboys and ranch folks from the Texas Panhandle have a keen sense of their values, ethics, and what is sometimes called the cowboy code. Dale Burson and cowboy poet Jay Snyder co-wrote a song entitled "The Code of the West." Here's a verse from that song. He knows what he stands for, won't veer from that trail. His vision is clear as the coyote's wail. He can't stand rude behavior towards horses and men. He's got no place in a world that he's living in.
In this world, work ethic is valued really high. If you will get out there and do your dead level best at whatever it is you're doing, I don't care if it's digging a ditch or moving cows or working on a windmill or building fence or whatever, be proud of what you do and try to make it fun. Try to find some joy in every mundane task that you have to do. If you tell somebody you're going to do something, then do everything in your possible realm to make it happen. Excuses don't fly very good in this culture. People don't like to hear excuses. I don't like to give excuses. If there's a reason something can't happen, let them know. Be straight up. You messed up, be straight up and let them know. Just say, yep, I messed up. Because then you're putting value on them too. You feel like that they have the right to know that you couldn't do whatever it was. And so you're trusting them, they're trusting you. You know, if it isn't yours, don't take it. If you borrow something, bring it back in better shape than when you got it. Give a little more than what is expected, if at all possible. The old deal of a day's wages is worth a day's work. If you hire somebody, treat them right, but expect them to give you their full measure too, and to be straight up and honest about it. Those are kind of the basic core principles. Treat your family like your family. Don't treat them like a bunch of hired hands. I'm not a great dishwasher, but I don't mind washing dishes for Becky because we're a team. Wouldn't have it any other way. And if I can help her out, because she helps me out a lot, well, what goes around comes around. You give up at least as much as what you get, and life seems to go a lot smoother. And I don't worry about how I'm going to be remembered, when I'm gone. If the only thing I would like for people to think, he was a good guy, he was a good neighbor, he was Ross and Brittany's dad, and he was Becky's husband, and he was a good one of those. I can't ask for any more than that. I had never had any visions that I was going to be this larger than life, anything. I just wanted to do my part. That was the way Granddad and Dad were, and a lot of the people around were. It makes the community come together if most near everybody is in that same vein. If everybody's giving more than their part, it all works really well. When tough times come, everybody weathers them together, which is a real comfort. And we try really hard to find joy in whatever. I've been criticized at times for that. People think I just make fun and laugh at everything. Well, not everything, but if you can't find joy, pretty rough sledding, then you can get down pretty bad. And so I try to make it fun. Dan Shipley and I have written a lot of songs together, and he's a wonderful, wonderful writer. We were talking about one day all the places and around and people that we knew, that generational places that, second, third generation. Then life happened, something happened. And the only way they can keep the place is to go get a job in town. And it's happened a lot of times, and I know it's happened all over the country, probably all over the world. And we were talking about that one day, and I said, I don't believe I've ever heard anybody address that particular subject in a poem or a song, either one. And so we just sat down and decided we'd write a song about it, and we wrote this in about 30 minutes. It just happened. I'd come up with a line, and we were like-minded enough in what the picture was. I'd have a line, and he'd have one to follow it, and it just back and forth. And anyway, it's called "Sign on the Gate," and it's one of the more requested songs I get. So, and this is one of those that seems to affect people a lot. The alarm clock ended the night at 5 a.m. I put on that light blue shirt, says my name is Jim. The cattle guard sings a tune, beneath the wheels. But the sign Daddy put on the gate is hanging there still. Yes, sir, and no, sir. Can I help you, ma'am? Means I'm getting closer to get to stay right where I am. To keep that sign on the gate means a job in town. It wasn't what I wanted, but what has to be. When everything fell apart in '83, that summer was hot and the prices were low. We laid Daddy to rest and I miss him so. Yes, sir, and no, sir. Can I help you, ma'am? Means I'm getting closer to get to stay right where I am. To keep that sign on the gate means a job in town. The work isn't that hard, but the days are long. Sometimes you have to do what you can just to get along. But the time on the clock pays the bills. But the sign Daddy put on the gate is hanging there still. Yes, sir, and no, sir. Can I help you, ma'am? Means I'm getting closer to get to stay right where I am. To keep that sign on the gate means a job in town. Now my day here is finished and I'm headed home. I've been around people all day, but I feel so alone. That the pride swells within me when I top the hill and see the sign Daddy put on the gate hanging there still. Yes, sir, and no, sir. Can I help you, ma'am? Means I'm getting closer to get to stay right where I am. To keep that sign on the gate means a job in town.
Beautiful. Thanks for playing that for me.
Well, sure. Yeah, anytime.
All right, folks, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Dale Burson for taking the time to visit with me. I'd like to thank my Trail Boss patron, Bob Kelly, for his support of the show. If you're enjoying Cowboy Crossroads, you can become a patron at patreon.com/cowboycrossroads. You can also make a donation at my website, andyhedges.com. If you'd like to contact me with a question or a comment or a story, I'd love to hear from you. Send an email to andy@andyhedges.com. Thank you for listening to Cowboy Crossroads.